What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Young Brother Soul podcast show. And guess what? It is me, your guy, the Young Brother of Soul. First and foremost, I just want to let everybody know, make sure y'all catch up on the latest episodes of the Young Brother Soul podcast show. And make sure y'all keep up when there's going to be some future episodes of the Young Brother Soul podcast show. Yeah, trust and believe. There are going to be way more episodes coming for the Young Brother Soul podcast show. Yeah. And I also want to give a shout out to my hometown team, the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, yeah, we did play the Raiders, but a win is a win. We shut them out, 31-0. Yeah, yeah. So hopefully get back on track. I think we will. Yeah, I think we will. That's all I'm gonna say about the Eagles for right now. Yeah. So on today's episode on or of the Young Brother Soul podcast show, what I want to talk about is NFL players that have suffered a torn ACL or MCL or LCL. Now, ligaments in your knee. Ligaments, ACL, MCL, and LCL, are like big muscles in your knee that support your knee. Well, not just a lot of NFL players suffer torn ligaments. You also have NBA, NHL, and believe it or not, MLB. Well, in sports, period. Any other sports, soccer, it's like torn ligaments are one of the top three well known injuries in sports, especially with football because it's a very contact sport, very physical sport. Now, to be honest with you, when you tear a ligament in your knee, it is the most painful thing to ever go through in your entire life. And not only that is very painful, doctors require you to have surgery so you can play sports again or you can walk again. That is why it is a season ending injury. Or it can be a career ending injury. Trust me, there were quite a few players in the NFL that suffered a career ending injury because of torn ligaments in their knee. Well, believe it or not, quite a few players that had torn their ACL actually came back the next year playing very well. But the thing is, when you go through a torn ligament injury, like I said, you have to get an operation, you have to go to rehabilitation, you have to learn how to walk again, you're going to have to learn how to run again. It's a lot. That is why it is a season ending injury. Whew. For the past, how can I say, 25, 30 years in the NFL, quite a few players have torn ligaments in their knees. And believe it or not, like I said, some come back very well the next year, and some just have career ending injuries. You really don't want to hear that your career is ending because of an injury. Well, things happen. And not only that, some people recover well, some people don't. So, for the players that have suffered torn ACLs, MCLs, or LCLs with torn ligaments in the NFL, prime example, Tom Brady. Tom Brady actually torn his ACL in the year 2008. He only threw for 76 yards in that game. It was week one. I remember that. And he got hit in the knee. So, you already know he was out for the rest of the season. The next year he came back. Tom Brady was actually balling. He was actually balling. And prime example, you had Carson Palmer who torn his ACL twice. He actually did it during a playoff game, and then he did it later on in his career. And then the next year he came back balling. He took the Cardinals to the NFC Championship the next year. And prime example, you have Thomas Davis, who was a all-time great linebacker for the Carolina Panthers. He torn his ACL 3 times on the same knee, I believe. Now, most of the times, when you tear your ACL once or twice, you really don't have a good chance by coming back. Well, like I said, he did it 3 times on the same knee. Now, the third time, you would think that you would be officially done in the NFL. No, he actually came back, and Thomas Davis was balling after he torn his ACL for the third time. I mean, he went to the Super Bowl with the Carolina Panthers. He was a tackling machine. So, like I said, some players recover from it well, some players don't. You had quite a few players. Like I said, you had Jordy Nelson, Jamal Charles, Rob Gronkowski, Travis Kelsey. You even had the great Philip Rivers, who came back to the NFL. He played in the 2007 AFC Championship with a torn ACL. And believe it or not, he actually played well in that game. But playing a game with a torn ACL, that shows you how tough Philip Rivers is. And not only that, you had some players that, oh my goodness, Darrell Revis. Then you had Sean Lee, who was actually a good linebacker for the Dallas Cowgirls. Yeah, he was actually good. You had the great Saquon Barkley, believe it or not, who torn his ACL. Yeah, he torn his ACL. And then the next year he came back balling. This when he was with the New York Giants, of course. But yeah, Saquon Barkley torn his ACL. Carson Wentz, who was actually balling his second year with the Eagles in 2017. Now, this is my thing. Leave a comment if you think I'm right or am I wrong. Am I right or am I wrong? As I should say. If Carson Wentz would have never torn his ACL towards the end of the 2017 season, do you think the Eagles would have won the Super Bowl that year? Maybe, maybe not. But he was actually having an MVP season. That is until he went and played against the LA Rams and torn his ACL. And to be honest with you, I knew something wasn't right the way how he was standing in the pocket. And after that, he threw a touchdown pass. And he broke the season record for most touchdown passes in Eagles history. Well, we all know the story with that. Torn his ACL, Nick Foles will go on and win a Super Bowl with the Eagles. So, to be honest with you, ever since Carson Wentz torn his ACL, he hasn't really been the same. No, he has not been the same. He suffered through injury after injury after injury. Then he went from team to team to team to team. So that's a sign right there that when you torn your ACL or tear your ACL, LCL, MCL, whatever it is, you're not the same. Some players are, some players not. You know, I mean, you even had a good quarterback, Joe Burrow, who torn his ACL in his rookie season. I mean, he was doing well during his rookie season till he torn his ACL. But the next year, he took the Cincinnati Bengals to the Super Bowl. Like I said, some players, they do well coming back off of a ligaments injury. Some players don't. Prime example of one of the most controversial injuries in the NFL. Who knows what his career would have been if he would have never got hurt. And that is, ladies and gentlemen, quarterback Robert Griffin III. Now, that right there is one of the most controversial moves in the NFL because he did indeed torn his ACL. He was not 100%. Of course, he wasn't 100%. Even the doctor said he should not go out and play. And what happened? During the playoff game against the Seattle Seahawks, I was about to say Cincinnati, I apologize for that. Seattle Seahawks, and everybody's seen this play. Hiked the ball, he fumbled, his knee gave out. So that right there, ladies and gentlemen, you know who I blame on that situation? I blame Mike Shanahan. Former head coach, I blame him. You know why? You knew that this man had a torn ACL. You knew that he was not 100%. You knew that he should not have been out there playing. You knew that. And what did you do? You go on ahead and let the man play. And ever since RG3 torn his ACL during his rookie season, he has not been the same. When I mean not been the same, after that, he suffered injuries after injuries after injuries. He went on to play for another team, was not the same. Went on to play for the Cleveland Browns, was not the same. Went on to play for the Baltimore Ravens, was not the same. That's why I did say this earlier. Can you imagine if Robert Griffin III would have never torn his ACL? Do you think he'd still be in the NFL today? Do you think he would have been a superstar like he was in Baylor? I think he would. But there's always a what if, what if, what if, what if, what if. There's always a what if in life. I learned that. That's why to this day, I blame Mike Shanahan for that. Leave a comment if you agree with me on that. Even the doctor said he was not 100%. If the doctor says he's not 100%, don't let the man play. Because you never know what could happen after that. Well, you shouldn't use the word never. You've seen what happened. I mean, even though Phillip Rivers played with an ACL injury, a torn ACL injury, but I don't believe he got hit as much as RG3 did. His leg gave out. So like I said, I blame Mike Shanahan for that. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. In this season, 2025, we had quite a few. Well, before I go there, we also had the great Keenan Allen, wide receiver, torn his ACL. And then we also had Kelvin Benjamin, who was part of that 2014 wide receiver draft class, which was actually good that year. He torn his ACL during the Panthers' Super Bowl run to Super Bowl 50. And to be honest with you, ever since he torn his ACL, he hasn't been the same either. See, the thing is, when athletes, period, when you tear your ACL, like I said, you have to get an operation, you have to go to rehabilitation, you have to learn how to walk again, you have to learn how to run again, and some players don't want to take that chance again. But some players are willing to get back on their feet. Now, like I said, before we talk about the 2025 season, we also had the great Jeremy Maclin, torn his ACL in 2013, but he did come back the next year for the Eagles, and he was balling. He was balling. Jamal Charles torn his ACL twice, but he came back balling. Jamal Charles was actually a good running back for the Kansas City Chiefs during that time. Twice. Like I said, Rob Gronkowski. He torn his ACL in 2013, And look what happened. The next year he came back balling. The Patriots won the Super Bowl. Well, if the Seahawks won and threw the ball at the 1 yard line, but I'm just gonna leave it at that. That might be another video we're gonna talk about. But other than that, yeah, Rob Gronkowski came back. He was balling. Won the Super Bowl. Bam. Good to go. Good to go. There was a guy by the name of Dante Fowler who was drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2015. And believe it or not, during the offseason workouts, torn his ACL. Did not get a chance to play his rookie season. Torn his ACL. Man, can you imagine if he wouldn't have torn his ACL during offseason workouts or offseason practice, whatever they do? He might have would have had a good rookie season. Even though he went from team to team to team, he's actually a good player. But torn his ACL. Another prime example. Haha. Deshaun Watson. Well, Deshaun Watson was a good player, good quarterback for the Houston Texans. And believe it or not, he was actually balling during his rookie season. Well, during practice, what happened? Torn his ACL. Rookie season was done. I mean, the next year he came back balling. He took the Houston Texans to the playoffs quite a few times, but torn his ACL during his rookie season. You hate to hear such good players, especially during their rookie season. Well, you know what? Not just their rookie season. Good players, period. They be balling during a year, and then all of a sudden, they have a torn ligament injury. And they have to be out for the rest of the season. But you know what's crazy? You really don't hear about NFL players breaking their legs or their feet, as I should say. Don't get me wrong, it still can happen. I'm not saying that it's not going to happen, but you really don't hear about NFL players breaking their legs anymore. You hear torn ACLs, torn ligaments. Like, you really don't hear about players breaking their ankles, torn Achilles now. Am I right or am I wrong? Leave a comment if you think I'm wrong. Or leave a comment if you think I'm right. Am I right or am I wrong? I'm just saying. But leave a comment if you think. But yeah, you really don't hear about NFL players breaking their legs or their feet. It's either concussions, as I said before in another episode with players suffering from CTE, torn Achilles, torn ligaments, and broken collarbones. And you really don't hear about NFL players breaking their arms. Not saying that it's not going to happen. Trust me, it still can happen. But you mostly hear about NFL players breaking their collarbones more so than breaking their arm or their hand. Yeah, you do. Or your fingers. Like I said, leave a comment if you think I'm right or if you think I'm wrong. Navarro Bowman, who was a great linebacker for the San Francisco 49ers, he torn his ACL in the 2013 NFC Championship. And I seen that video live. That was one of the most craziest injuries I ever seen. The way how his knee bent, I don't know how he was able to get up after that. Then the next year, of course, he was balling with the 49ers. It's a good linebacker. Good linebacker. Von Miller, oh man, who's also one of the greatest outside linebackers. He torn his ACL in the year 2013, the year that the Broncos went to the Super Bowl. Well, the one that got blown out by Seattle. But what if he would have never got hurt? I think the Broncos defense would have been way better in the Super Bowl that they lost. But the next year he came back balling. I believe he had over, 14, 15 sacks. And then the year after that, they won the Super Bowl. So, yeah, that shows you right there That shows you right there. And then another great prime example, after Tom Brady, of course, Adrian Peterson. Now, Adrian Peterson is one of the best running backs in the league that I ever seen growing up. Trust me, I've seen a lot, but he was good. He torn his ACL towards the end of the 2011 season. Phew. The way how he torn his ACL, that was crazy. I mean, the way how he was down on that ground, he was pounding like, oh my God, he was in so much pain. That's how bad it was. But guess what? He didn't let that stop him though. He came back the next year and he was 9 yards short from breaking the all-time rushing single record of all time. He was 9 yards short. So that shows you that he was definitely dedicated coming back playing. And he did. He was balling that year. But he was 9 yards short. 9 yards short. You even had Darrell Revis, excuse me, Tyron Matthew, who torn his ACL twice. I mean, these are some strong players that come back from injuries and then some career ending injuries. To the 2025 season, you have Michael Parsons, Patrick Mahomes, Malik Neighbors, Nick Bosa, all torn their ACL in the 2025 season. But this is not the first time that Nick Bosa torn his ACL. I'm not sure if it was on the same knee, but when he torn his ACL back in 2020, of course he was out for the rest of the season. The next year he came back balling. He had over 10 or 15 sacks, or maybe was it 20? Something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. He torn his ACL again. And then, of course, Patrick Mahomes torn his ACL. Oh, boy. Michael Parsons, who is a heck of a player, torn his ACL. But those two torn their ACL on the same day, which is crazy. And then, of course, you have Malik Neighbors, who's a good wide receiver for the New York Giants. Looked like he was going to have a breakout season this season, but he wound up being out for the rest of the season because he torn his ACL. Mm, 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 mm. Mm. Even the great Odell Beckham torn his ACL twice. I believe it was in 2020. And then he torn his ACL while he was playing with the LA Rams in the Super Bowl against the Cincinnati Bengals. Torn his ACL in the Super Bowl, which is why he was out for the whole season of 2022. Then he came back into the league in 2023. Torn ACLs, man. Torn ACLs. Even the great Donovan McNabb torn his ACL one year. Oh man, I remember that. He torn his ACL against the Tennessee Titans. I mean, he wasn't having a good game that day. No, he wasn't. But torn his ACL. The next year he came back. He did okay. I mean, he didn't go to the playoffs that year, but the next year after that, he took the Eagles back to the NFC Championship. But yeah, them torn ACLs, man, it's nothing to play with. Even the great Eric Berry, who was a great safety for the Kansas City Chiefs, torn his ACL. Then he came back the next year balling. Eric Berry was a good safety. Yeah, he was. He was a good safety, man. Definitely was a good safety. I mean, Brian Cushing, good linebacker for the Houston Texans, torn his ACL one year. I mean, you don't have to play offense. You can play on defense and still tear your ACL. You could be the hardest hitter. You could hit somebody hard, and the way how your knee goes or your leg goes, you still can tear your ACL. It is not a great thing to go through. It is not. It is very painful. Very painful. Then you also had the great Geno Atkins. The Bengals gave him a big contract extension in 2013, which he was a good defensive tackle. Then that year he torn his ACL. You're like, wow, he just gave you a good contract extension and then you take your ACL. I know he probably was like, oh my God, that'll do it. That'll do it. Y'all remember Jordy Nelson, who was a good wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers, torn his ACL in the 2015 preseason. Julian Edelman torn his ACL, excuse me, during a preseason game. And sometimes you can tear your ACL or torn ligaments on a non contact. Those non contact injuries, I believe, are crazier. Yeah, some of them torn it non contact. Jordy Nelson, Julian Edelman, even one of the Grammaticas, the kickers for the Arizona Cardinals, he was celebrating, came down, torn his ACL. Even there was a good linebacker for the Detroit Lions named Steven Tulloch, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. He torn his ACL in 2014 after doing this silly celebration. Yeah. Just jumped up and landed on his knee and torn your ACL. Yeah. Torn his ACL. Now, for the players that had career ending injuries, oh my goodness. You had the late, great Gale Sayers, who was a heck of a running back for the Chicago Bears. He was awesome. Well, in 1 year, he torn his ACL on his right leg, right knee, as I should say. Then 2 years later, torn his ACL on his left knee. Or left or right or left, one of them. Career ending injury. He was only in the league for like maybe 5 or 6, 7 years. He had to retire because of his knees. And not only that, during that time, they didn't have the technology like we do today. So, can you imagine if he would have never torn his ACLs? Oh, Gale Sayers would have been way up there, even though he was a Hall of Famer. But I don't know. If he would have never torn his ACLs, do you think Walter Payton would have been on the Bears? Who knows? But another great player, well, as I should say, who I think was great, he was a fullback for the Eagles, Leonard Weaver. Leonard Weaver definitely suffered a career-ending injury. I remember he played against the Green Bay Packers in the 2010 season. That is, of course, the year the Packers won the Super Bowl that year, of course. And Michael Vick came back, comeback player of the year. And we wore the Kelly Green celebration of the 50 years at the time of the 1960 NFL championship. And I remember seeing him get tackled a certain way. I forgot who tackled him. And I think they landed on his knee. And he has not been back in the NFL since. Career-ending injury. He retired quite a few years afterwards, but oh my goodness, Leonard Weaver was a good fullback for the Eagles. It's a shame his career ended because of a career-ending injury. Then, of course, you had the great Terrell Davis. Terrell Davis was a heck of a running back for the Denver Broncos. Now, he did win 2 Super Bowls with them back to back. I believe he was MVP of one of them, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. And after John Elway retired, I believe it was in the year 2000 or 2001, devastating career injury. Devastating, torn his ACL real bad. Can you imagine if Terrell Davis would have never torn his ACL? Can you imagine if he would have never had that career-ending injury? Terrell Davis' record probably would have been way more than what he had. but he had to retire because of his career-ending injury. Bradley Chubb, who was a good running back, torn his ACL twice. I believe the last time he torn his ACL, he was playing with the Cleveland Browns against the Steelers. And the way how he got hit in his knee, oh my goodness. It's like the person's shoulder hit him and his knee went backwards. Oh my God. That is definitely another way to tear your ACL. If somebody hits you in your knee, you're going to be hurting. That is not a good feeling. Not a good feeling. Prime example, Randall Cunningham, 1991, got hit his knee, out for the season. Phew. And the way how he got hit, his knee went back and then his body, oh my goodness. Mm. Another prime example of an NFL player that torn his ACL, quarterback Teddy Bridgewater, who was playing with the Minnesota Vikings. His ACL injury was so bad in 2016, he said his knee dislocated. And of course, he was out for the whole season. I believe he was out for the whole 2017 season, too. He was basically out for 2 years. I remember that. I remember that. It was like before the 2016 season started. Dislocated. That is crazy. Now, can you imagine if Teddy Bridgewater would have never torn his ACL? His career would have been awesome. I mean, even though he played with the Vikings, but the Vikings, but I believe he definitely would have had a great season or great career if he would have never torn his ACL. Not only that, like I said, it dislocated, very painful. And not only that, that the NFL players that torn their ACL, you also had NBA players that torn their ACL. Kyrie Irving, Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson, I believe, torn his ACL during the 2019 NBA Finals, if I'm not mistaken. But a good prime example of a player tearing their ACL, Derrick Rose. I will never forget, it was the 2012 playoffs. My hometown basketball team, the Philadelphia 76ers, were playing the Chicago Bulls in the playoffs. Derrick Rose was a heck of a basketball player. What happened during the playoff game? He injured toward his ACL. It's like the way how he jumped and came back down, his leg or knee buckled, and everybody was like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And now, to be honest with you, I believe if Derrick Rose would have never got hurt during that 2012 playoff game against the Sixers would have lost to the Bulls. I was about to say Bears. Well, they both from Chicago. They would have lost to the Bulls. Like I said, there are quite a few NBA players that torn their ACL. Between football and basketball, those two have torn ligaments injuries through those sports. Then, of course, you have hockey. Some hockey players torn their ACL. And then, of course, you have baseball. You can tear your torn ligaments in baseball. Yes, you can. One player, I believe it was for the Chicago Cubs, city of Chicago. I forget his name. Torn his ACL. And then that same year, he came back to play in the World Series, and the Cubs won the World Series. So, yeah. Not just the four major sports that you could suffer torn ligaments injury. You could suffer it in other sports. Depends on how you're playing during that game. You can tear your ligaments not playing sports. You can trip and fall the way how your knee is. Yeah, you can. That's why torn ligaments is the top 3 injuries in sports. You hear about it so much. It's like nowadays, especially with football, because it's the most contact sport. Well, besides hockey, a lot of NFL players year after year after year after year tear their ACL, MCL, LCL. Like I said, you don't hear about players breaking their arms, their legs, their feet. Not saying that it's not going to happen. It can happen. But it's like nowadays you hear players tearing their ACL. That is why when a player tear their ACL, they be out for the whole season. You have to get an operation. You have to do rehabilitation. You have to learn how to walk again. You have to learn how to run again. It takes a lot, man. It takes a real lot of work to do to get the ACL right. Then you have some that are tear it again. You tear your ACL twice, oh boy. There's not always a guarantee that you're going to come back as the same player. Now, 3 times, well, Thomas Davis, he torn his ACL 3 times in the same knee. He came back balling. But we don't want to hear about players or see players tear their ACL. We don't even want to see that, period. But if they do, we don't want to see it happen a second time. Now, third time, mm, that's why, in a way, can you imagine if any of these players would have never torn their ACLs during them seasons? It might have been way different than what it is now, but torn ACL, it's not a pretty sight, man. No, it's not. It's not a pretty sight. It's not a thing to play with. It is no joke. No joke. And like I said, you don't even have to play sports to suffer a torn ligament injury. You can get hurt at work. You can get hurt by just tripping and falling. To all the NFL players that have season ending injuries, I hope y'all have a very speedy recovery. And try to be more careful. That's all I can say. Just try to be more careful. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of this episode of the Young Brother Soul podcast show. Before this video ends, make sure y'all subscribe, hit that thumbs up, leave a comment, and hit that notification button. And make sure y'all tune in for more episodes of the Young Brother Soul podcast show. Yes. And to all those, happy holidays, stay safe, and like I said, tune in for more episodes of the Young Brother Soul podcast show. Stay safe. Like I said, happy holidays. You'll see again. Well, you see me again, of course. But thank you for watching. Have a good one.